Welcome, my name is Mindy Mandell, and in this video I'm going to talk about propositions 159 through 165 in Proclus's Elements of Theology. For those of you who want to see the full playlist, I will link it here. And as I've been doing throughout this series, I am using the E.R. Dodds translation. For those of you who do not have the paper version, there is a link in the description box for a PDF. And now, jumping into the text, I'm going to start with Proposition 159. Every order of gods is derived from the two initial principles, limit and infinity. But some manifest predominantly the causality of limit, others that of infinity. Limit was mentioned back in Proposition 157. And I'm just going to scroll up to the top of the page here because it's on the same page. And this one was about the paternal causes and the demiurgic causes. And the explanation here opened with both of these causes being ranked under the principle of limit. But it's not until we come here, though, that Proclus makes it expressly clear that limit and infinity rank higher than even the gods. This proposition was something of a light bulb moment for me the first time I read it. So these are the two initial principles that even the gods derive from. Proclus writes, "For every order must proceed from both, because the communications of the primal causes extend through all derivative ranks." And notice here that Dodds cites Proposition 97. This one states that the originative cause of each series communicates its distinctive property to the entire series, and what the cause is primitively, the series is by remission. And hence Proclus's statement that limit and infinity must extend through all the derivative ranks. And Proclus goes on, but at some points, limit is dominant in the mixture, at others, infinity. And this is what we saw with the paternal and demiurgic gods back in Proposition 157. Those gods were ranked under the principle of limit. We can also, by the way, put the generative gods under the principle of infinity, being tied to potency, because infinity, remember, is the first potency. And Proclus ends by stating, "Accordingly, there results one group of a determinative character, that in which the influence of limit prevails, and another characterized by infinitude, in which the element of infinity preponderates." In the next few propositions, we are going to see Proclus tying the gods to divinized intellect. It would be helpful to keep in mind a principle that was introduced back in Proposition 139. Here we learned that the sequence of principles which participate the divine Henads extends from being to the bodily nature, since being is the first, and body, inasmuch as we speak of heavenly or divine bodies, would be the last participant. And then in the explanation, we're told that deity exists on the corporeal, the psychical, and the intellective level. But it's by participation in each case, since deity in the primary sense is only proper to the Henads. And so we can talk of gods at each realm of reality. We can talk about intelligible gods, intellectual gods, psychical gods, or gods of the realm of soul, and even corporeal or mundane gods. But gods at each of these ranks are not pure Henads. Rather, they are gods by participation. Now, if you keep this in mind, then the next few propositions will be much easier to put into a greater framework. This notion of intellect functioning providentially as a god was actually first introduced a few propositions earlier than this one, in 134. It was here that Proclus showed us that every divine intelligence exercises intellection as an intelligence, but providence as God. Okay, with that introduction, I'm now going to jump into proposition 160. All divine intelligence is perfect and has the character of unity. It is the primal intelligence and produces the others from its own being. For if it is divine, it is filled with divine henads, and it has the character of unity. And if this is so, it is also perfect, being full of the divine goodness. So Proclus is talking here of intelligible intellect. Proposition 129 looks at the various levels of participation in divinity. And this one reads, all divine bodies are such through the mediation of a divinized soul, all divine souls through a divine intelligence, and all divine intelligences by participation in a divine henad. The henad is immediate deity. The intelligence is most divine. The soul is divine, and the body is dissimilar. And so here we are seeing intellect as divine through participation in a divine henad. Dodds also cites proposition 133, pointing to the goodness that is the mark of having the character of unity. And just to quickly remind you of this proposition, this is the one that reads, every god is a beneficent henad or a unifying excellence, and has this substantive character as God. But the primal God is the good unqualified and unity unqualified, while each of those posterior to him is a particular excellence and a particular henad. Coming back to proposition 160, what we're also seeing here in this first sentence is the idea of perfection, which is closely tied to intellect at all levels of reality, because intellect is the revertive term. And when intellect reverts to its cause, it is filled with the goodness of that cause. In the case of the primal intellect, this goodness is the divine goodness of the gods. Proposition 112 introduced us to this idea, that of the first members of each order having the form of their priors. And here it is again, so you can see that. The first members of any order have the form of their priors, and this creates the continuity of procession in the universe. And so the primal intellect then would be filled with divine goodness. And then going on to the second sentence, but if it has these properties, it is also primal, as being united with the gods. For the highest intelligence is divinized intelligence. And there's the reference to proposition 112. And being the primal intelligence, it bestows by its own act substantiality upon the rest. For all that has secondary existence derives its substance from a principle which exists primitively. So that perfective act of reverting to its cause and being filled with its goodness is also a creative act, resulting in the unfolding of subsequent intellects. And this helps us better understand the structure of each series as laid out in propositions such as 18 that is cited here. Proposition 18 is the one that states, everything which by its existence bestows a character on others, itself primitively possesses that character which it communicates to the recipients. And then the part in yellow is pointing out that the character as it pre-exists in the original giver has a higher reality than the character bestowed. It is what the bestowed character is, but is not identical with it, because it exists primitively, whereas the other is only by derivation. And so we're seeing the primal intellect as that which has a higher reality, and the subsequent intellects as being intellect by derivation. Okay, proposition 161. All the true being which is attached to the gods is a divine intelligible and unparticipated. In the Proclean system, every order has a transcendent, unparticipated cause at its head. Intelligible intellect is unparticipated to the realms that are subsequent to it. Yet even this order has an unparticipated monad. In this proposition, Proclus is calling that monad true being. And Proclus starts off by stating that true being is, as has been shown, the first of the principles which participate divine unification. And for this, Dodd cites Proposition 138. Of all the principles which participate the divine character and are thereby divinized, the first and highest is being. And then Proclus goes on to add that true being makes the content of the intelligence or the intellect. For the intelligence too is an existent because filled with being. So being is the content of the intellect. And this is very much consistent with Plotinus, who saw the intelligence and being as inseparable. Here, for example, is a quote from his treatise on the three primal hypostases. He says, "The intelligence gives existence to being in thinking it. Being, by being object of thought, gives to the intelligence its thinking and its existence. Their oneness, which is simultaneously intelligence and being, thinking and object of thought, is twofold. The intelligence inasmuch as it thinks, and being inasmuch as it is the object of thought." And so we see that true being is the first of the principles which participate divine unification, and is also the content of the intelligence or intellect. And so here is the conclusion then. It surely results that true being is a divine intelligible. Divine as being divinized, intelligible as the principle which gives content to the intelligence and is participated by it. It is a divine intelligible as being divinized by henads. And notice that here Proclus is giving us a definition of what he means by the word intelligible. It is the principle which gives content to the intelligence and is participated by it. And Proclus goes on, "And while the intelligence is an existent because of primal being, this primal being is itself separate from the intelligence, because intelligence is posterior to being." Remember, Proclus is using the word separate to mean transcendent. And this leads him to the next step in his logic. Again, unparticipated terms subsist prior to the participated, so that prior to the being which is consubstantial, or together, with the intelligence at the same level, there must be a form of being which exists in itself and beyond participation. Here, Proclus is referring back to the structure that was introduced in Propositions 23 and 24. There's the unparticipated monad, then the participated monad, and then the participants that follow in that series. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because I think you're already quite familiar with this one, but I just wanted to remind you of which proposition that Dodds was citing. And this is the one that gave us first the unparticipated, and then it gives something of itself, whereof the receiver becomes a participant. And the given attains substantial existence as a participated term, and then following that are the participants. I'm just going to scroll down because we haven't spent as much time with Proposition 24, but this one is also relevant. All that participates is inferior to the participated, and this latter to the unparticipated. So just going from the bottom up, the participants, and then the participated, and then the unparticipated. Now, coming back to Proposition 161, what Proclus is setting up here is an unparticipated being which is transcendent, and next, an intelligible level at which being and intellect have that consubsistent relationship described in this sentence. And it's described both by Proclus and by Plotinus in that earlier quote. But Proclus is adding a higher monad beyond the intelligible that Plotinus described, one which is the immediate cause of the intelligible. In Proclus's Theology of Plato, this unparticipated monad is called the one being. Here in this proposition, he is calling it true being. For true being is intelligible, not as coordinate with the intelligence, but as perfecting it, without loss of transcendence, in that it communicates to the intelligence the gift of being and fills it with a truly existent essence. Giving the intelligence the gift of being and filling it with a truly existent essence is very much consistent with the quote that I showed earlier from Plotinus, and also consistent with Proposition 23, where the unparticipated monad is described as giving something of itself. Okay, Proposition 162. All those henads which illuminate true being are secret and intelligible. Secret as conjoined with the one, but intelligible as participated by being. So the henads, although they're transcendent, are not completely unknown. Only the first principle is completely transcendent. And Proclus introduced this idea in Proposition 123. All that is divine is itself ineffable and unknowable by any secondary being because of its supra-existential unity. But it may be apprehended and known from its existence, which participate it. Wherefore only the first principle is completely unknowable, as being unparticipated. So keeping this in mind will help you better see what is going on in Proposition 162. And the description begins, "For all the gods are named from the principles which are attached to them, because their diverse natures, otherwise unknowable, may be known from these dependent principles. All deity is in itself unspeakable and unknowable, being of like nature with the unspeakable one. Yet, from the diversities of the participants may be inferred the peculiar attributes of the participated." And Proposition 123 is the one that I just showed you, naming the first principle as the only principle which is wholly unknowable. Now the sentence opens, let me go back a little here. The sentence opens with the statement that gods are named based on the nature attached to them. So thus we can talk of intellectual gods or mundane gods and so on. And going on to the next sentence, Proclus states that thus the gods who illuminate true being are intelligible, because true being is a divine and unparticipated intelligible which subsists prior to the intelligence. And this follows from the previous sentence and from the lofty position of true being that was laid out in Proposition 161. For inasmuch as participated terms stand in the same mutual relation as their participants, it follows that true being would not have been attached to the first order of gods, did not that order possess a nature primal in its operation, and a power of perfecting the remaining gods. In other words, there is an analogous relationship between the gods and their participants. Beings that are higher in the ranking of beings will be dependents of gods that are higher in the divine ranking. Now, Dodds did not cite Propositions 108 and 109 here, but doing so would perhaps have been fitting, and I'm going to quickly review them because I think that they will make this current point more clearly. 108 gives us the general principle, and 109 is an application of it. So 108 reads that every particular member of any order can participate the monad of the rank immediately superadjacent or above it in one of two ways, either through the universal of its own order or through the particular member of the higher series which is coordinate with it in respect of its analogous relation to that series as a whole. Now, to see this applied, we can take a look at 109 and get some examples. And I'm just going to scroll down here. So, for example, every particular intelligence participates the first henad, which is above intelligence, either through the universal intelligence, so going up to the universal intelligence and then over to the henad, or through the particular henad that is coordinate with it, and then through that it can participate the universal henad. Every particular soul participates the universal intelligence both through the universal soul and through its particular intelligence. And every particular corporeal nature participates the universal soul both through the universal nature or through a particular soul. So what you're seeing here is a coordinate train of terms from realm to realm, and it even applies to the divine series. And so what is relevant here in Proposition 162 is that true being, as the first of the participants, must relate to the first order of gods. And those gods are the three that were introduced in Propositions 151 through 153. And these were the paternal gods, and then the generative gods, and at the extremity, the perfect gods, or the perfective gods. Okay, Proposition 163. Now this one and the next two after it all set up the subsequent levels of gods after the intelligible. Here, Proclus is focused on the intellectual gods. And this one reads, all those henads are intellectual, whereof the unparticipated intelligence enjoys participation. For as intelligence is to true being, so are these henads to the intelligible henads. So again, you see that coordination in the rankings. As therefore the latter, illuminating being, are themselves intelligible, so these, illuminating the divine and unparticipated intelligence, are themselves intellectual, not as subsisting in the intelligence, but in the causative sense, as subsisting prior to the intelligence and bringing it to birth. And so these gods that we call intellectual gods are transcendent causes of the intellective series. They bring the intellective series to birth. And now Proclus is carrying through the same line of reasoning here in Proposition 164. After giving us intelligible gods and intellectual gods, he is ready to give us the gods that unfold the realm of soul. These gods go by various names, depending on the writing and also on the translator. Here they are called supramundane. Supra meaning beyond, and mundane as in physical. So these gods are those that are beyond the physical realm. Now, the realm of soul is seen as that which governs the physical world. And so this is a fitting name, I think. And Proclus writes, all those henads are supramundane, whereof all the unparticipated soul enjoys participation. For since the unparticipated soul occupies the next station above the world order, the gods whom it participates are also supramundane, and are related to the intellectual and the intelligible gods as soul is to intelligence, and intelligence to true being. As then all soul is dependent upon intelligences, and intelligence is converted upon the intelligible, so the supramundane gods depend from the intellectual in the same manner as these from the intelligible. We just saw earlier in this video that intellect reverts to the intelligible. What Proclus is referring to when he says that all soul is dependent upon intelligences can be found in Proposition 20. Here we see that beyond all bodies is the soul's essence, beyond all souls the intellective principle, and beyond all intellective substances the one. And so we see a chain of sorts that's linking one realm to the next. The physical is linked to the soul is linked to intellect, and all is ultimately linked to the one. And I'm going to round out this set of propositions with Proclus's introduction to the gods that unfold the physical world. And this is Proposition 165. All those henads are intramundane, which any sensible body participates. Intramundane literally means within the physical. So these are the gods that are often referred to simply as mundane gods. For through the mediation of intelligence and soul, such henads irradiate certain parts of the world. Intelligence is not present without soul to any intramundane body. Neither is deity directly conjoined with soul, since participation is through like terms. Soul is the medium between body and intellect. Body cannot directly participate intellect. We participate intellect by our identity as soul. Likewise, soul cannot directly participate deity. It is again through a medium. Now, as wonderful as participation in intellect can be, the real benefit is that by way of intellect, we as souls can hitch a ride, so to speak, to experience divine being itself. Proposition 32, by the way, is one of the references to likeness, that all reversion is through likeness. And here it is again for your reference, that all reversion is accomplished through a likeness of the reverting terms to the goal of reversion. Intelligence itself participates the henad in virtue of its own highest element, which is intelligible. This is a reiteration of a few other propositions, including 160, which I presented earlier in this video, and also proposition 134, which I cited in that earlier discussion. And Proclus goes on, these henads, then, are intramundane in the sense that they give fulfillment to the entire world order, and that they render certain visible bodies divine. Here, Proclus is giving us the function of the mundane gods. They give fulfillment to the entire world order. He needs to say a bit more, though, about this idea of rendering certain visible bodies divine. For any such body is divine not because of soul, which is primally divine, nor because of intelligence, for not even the intelligence is identical with the one, but while it owes to soul its life and its power of self-movement, and to intelligence its perpetual freedom from variation and the perfection of its ordered motion. It is divine not through these things, but because it is unified. And let me pause here, because there's a lot going on in this sentence. Proclus is showing the providential gifts from each realm in the chain of participation. From soul, our bodies receive life and the power of motion. From intellect, we experience stability and a certain perfection. And any of you who meditate regularly have perhaps enjoyed that silence and stillness in your sittings. And those of you who haven't, well, you have something to look forward to. It is really quite beautiful. But Proclus goes on to say that body is not made divine even through this participation in intellect. No, it is divinized through the gods and the unity that they bestow. It is divine not through these things, but because it is unified. And if it has a providential office, this character is due to the same cause. Now, proposition 120 is about providence being the office of the gods. Proposition 120 reads, every god embraces in his substance the function of exercising providence towards the universe, and the primary providence resides in the gods. So here we see the gods exercising providence not only over the intelligible that immediately participates them, but because of their transcendence, the gods can exercise providence over all the realms, even the lowest realm, the physical. And with proposition 165, we have gotten through the section on the gods. From here, Proclus is going to go more in depth into looking at intellects. If you have any questions at this point or anything about the gods as you look over all of those propositions, do not hesitate to drop me an email or put a comment below. Let me know how you're doing. And if you found this helpful, please give it a like and please subscribe if you don't already. Either way, I hope that you will join me for the next video as I go into the section on intelligences. Thank you very much.